My name is Ron Langel, and I was born at Templeton, Iowa, March 29th, 1949. Grew up on a farm just south of Templeton and loved it there. Small town Iowa, if you're always there, you don't know anything different. It was a big deal to get to Des Moines because that was just such a huge city. But in the small town, everybody knew everybody. We had a close relationship with our neighbors, and we always knew that we had each other's backs covered that way. So that was kind of comforting always. I had two uncles who served overseas in World War II. I would listen to their stories. I also listened to my uncles and aunts talk about the sacrifices they made during World War II so that materials and supplies could be shipped to the military. And I thought, man, these people made a real sacrifice for our nation so that we could have freedom, and that someday when I got old enough, I too was going to serve in the military. You got to remember that in my teenage years is when the United States is first in the involvement in Vietnam, and also it was a time of a lot of social unrest. The Vietnam War was in its infancy sort of, but there was some opposition. There was also some demonstrations and protests against that. I wasn't so sure, about this Vietnam thing, if it was right to be there. I spent 2 years in college. I didn't quite know really what I wanted to do at that point in time. I would just let my college deferment fall away and allow the draft to take me. I would just put in a 2-year service in instead of 4, probably, and see where those 2 years went, and that way I could do my obligation without committing a long period of time. I was drafted, I think, at the end of May, but I left on July 2nd of 1969. I went to the United States Army. At the reception station in Omaha, they counted down about every 5 guys, and they'd say Army, 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 Marines, Army, 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 Marines. And those guys that found out that they were going to the Marines, there's just a look of shock on their face. All I know is we took a battery of tests when we came in, and after basic training, they said medic. I about fell over. Even though as a farm boy, I hadn't even given a baby pig a shot at that point in time. And so I thought, well, okay, medic, here I am. Maybe I'm glad I'm not infantry. And so I decided that I would apply myself in school. And medic training was pretty intense. It was classroom training. By and far, most of our time was classroom. And I paid attention. I really did. I just made up my mind that if I was going to be in the service for a couple of years, I was going to be as good of a serviceman as I could be. I was only in the Army 5 months, and I was standing in Vietnam. I had a 2-week leave after AIT, and to Vietnam I went. I was in 25th Infantry Division, medical unit, battalion of Cu Chi, 3 Corps, near Saigon. My first 3 months I was there, I was assigned to a very special unit called MedCap, Medical Civil Action Program. And we treated the civilians. Every day when we left the base camp, we would go to a village or a hamlet. Infantry would sweep the perimeter of the town or the internal parts of the town to make sure it was clear. Then they would hold a perimeter around us. We would set up. There was a team of 3 corpsmen like me, and we had a doctor and a dentist. We had an interpreter, and people would come up to us with their problems or issues, and we would help them the best we could. Some people who were very, very ill, we would take back to our hospital on base. After 3 months, I went into the to the first sergeant, and I'm an E3 private first class, which became automatic as soon as he landed in Vietnam. And I'm telling that first sergeant that I thought that MedCap thing was a bunch of baloney, and I wanted out of it. He put his arms back and he said, okay, what makes you think that this is baloney? And I said, because we're treating the enemy, and I know we are, and I feel that's wrong. The North Vietnamese had a regular army uniform. The Viet Cong was anybody who sympathized with the North but were part of villages and hamlets. And at night, a rocket every once in a while, or mortar would come in from one of the nearby villages. Well, who did it? I was surprised. The first sergeant said, "Okay, Ron," he said, "you got it figured out. I'll have to take you off this program." I said, "Well, what did I figure out?" He said, "You're in an all-volunteer hazardous duty job. I couldn't get any volunteers, and I just stuck you in it." He said, "Now that you're out, I'll reassign you." So I was temporarily assigned to supply and transportation. And being a farm boy, I could run any of those trucks that they had. They issued me an official military driver's license, and I was driving deuce and a halves with trailers in convoy, and we were hauling supplies. One of my missions, I ended up in Cambodia, and they had a sweep in there where they found a lot of munitions were stored in Cambodia, and I hauled back weapons, a whole cache one time of AK-47s. But as part of that job assignment, I was also somewhat attached to the nearby hospital that was on base. And they would call me to drive an ambulance to go someplace and maybe pick up a GI and bring him back to the hospital. But the worst part of that whole job was also being called by the hospital to attend with a physician to do graves registration, where another body bag would come in and we would try to determine the cause of death, fill out the death certificate. That was terrible. That was the worst part. Some of those bodies were in terrible condition. Sometimes they'd shoot down a helicopter and everybody in there would burn upon the crash. North Vietnamese or whoever, Viet Cong, would set up a perimeter around it to try to ambush any of the GIs who tried to retrieve those bodies. And sometimes it took a while to clear them out. And by the time we actually got to view the deceased, there was a terrible state of decomposition. I made rank real fast. I was only in the Army for 13 months and I was an E5. The first sergeant just really liked me. I worked constantly. If I wasn't doing something as a medic, I was helping guys build a shower. We had a kind of an open well. I helped build a well shed over it to protect it from the elements. I helped build sidewalks so that we could get from our shower to our hooch. Different things like that. The last about 5 months I was in Vietnam, I was a ward master for a 23-bed GI ward. And I made the duty roster. I oversaw new people coming in. I do remember that one time we had a deuce and a half loaded with gravel. And the first sergeant said, "I need 3 of you guys up there with a sand shovel to shovel that off so that we can gravel our drive." And I'm up there with the 2 other guys and we're shoveling off this gravel. And I don't know if it was an officer or a higher ranking NCO, but one of them walked by the truck. We didn't know that man. He just pointed at me and said, "You're an Iowa farm boy." And I said, "Okay." The 3 of us here didn't have a shirt on, we had no cap, we didn't display any of our rank, anything like that. And I said, "How can you tell that I am an Iowa farm boy?" And he said, "You're the only one who knows how to use a sand shovel." I used to write back to my parents letters to try to make them feel that I was safe no matter what. You know, back in the early months there when I was on that MedCap team, we didn't get back to base camp every night. Sometimes we spent our night in a fire support base on a hilltop. Nothing happened while I was there, but I always felt like those places are pretty vulnerable. But the base camp itself, the main base camp, we were located in an area that had really no timber, no foliage, no forestry around us. It was open. We could see anybody coming at us from a long distance. and there was concertina wire around it. There were guard towers with floodlights. It was a good-sized camp. It had streets, and it had designated street signs even. So it was very safe there. I used to have little care packages sent once in a while by Mom. She would send cookies and salami. There really wasn't anything from home I missed just too much, I suppose. I think it might have been my family, my friends, and my fiance more than anything. I got a 2-week early release from Vietnam. And as soon as I knew that, I wrote back to my fiance, and they went to work and got wedding plans made, and I was home about 10 days and I was married. I was assigned to Fort Riley, Kansas, and I continued my duty as a medic there. I just look forward to getting back to the Iowa farm and being a farmer, because that was in my blood, and I knew a long time before that I wanted to be a farmer, and that's what I did. The Vietnamese had a real appreciation for their family and a very profound respect for their elders. As they aged, the younger took care of the older. And I was thinking that was just marvelous. I thought that was wonderful. I firmly believe that all citizens of the United States should serve our country in some form or fashion. I know the Vietnam thing was a political thing, and it's been argued back and forth, why, if we should have ever even been there. But I came back, I think, as a stronger human being, a stronger sense of patriotism, and I felt good about caring for humanity. No regrets. I'd do it again.